My name is Dmitry Jemerov. I'm the CTO of JetBrains, and I've been involved with the IntelliJ Platform probably from the very beginning of its existence as a separate entity. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can, as plugin developers or product developers, can leverage IntelliJ Platform to build your own stuff and maybe even sell it and earn a lot of money doing that. So first of all, what is IntelliJ Platform? IntelliJ Platform is actually the foundation of all of the IDEs that we have built. So it was extracted from the IntelliJ IDEA and made more general and refactored, and now it's a building block for not just our IDEs but also some other tools. And it's completely open source and free and available on the Apache tool license, so you can use it for essentially any kind of product development yourself. So first of all, we'll look at how we use IntelliJ Platform in our products, and it may be actually more. You may find out something new. It's probably more than you thought it was. We were using it. So as I mentioned, the IntelliJ Platform began as part of the IntelliJ IDEA code base, and actually, the first version of the IDE did not have any plugin API, and then gradually we made it more flexible and more extensible and added extension points and modularized it and so on and so forth. And if someone is interested in how we went about it, I'm going to give a presentation on it during that JetBrains Day in Malmo on September 7th. So there's a link over there that you can use to register if you're interested, and I hope it will be also recorded and published online later. Now there are all the small IDEs that we have built on top of the platform. So PyCharm, RubyMine, and all the others. There's the C++ IDE that we have recently announced that we are right now working on. There is one more IDE that we haven't announced yet, but we are also working on it, and so stay tuned for further announcements, I guess. And what these products actually are it's mostly essentially a repackaged distribution of the platform, which removes the stuff that is not needed for a particular IDE, that bundles the plugin that is relevant for the market that we are talking about. So PyCharm bundles the Python plugin, RubyMine bundles the Ruby plugin, and so on. And we customize the UI to make it the most relevant and most applicable for the target audience. So for stuff like new project creation, project setup, interpreter configuration, and so on, it is custom in the IDEs and different from how it looks in IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate. And technically, they all live in the same source tree as IntelliJ IDEA itself, so this makes the whole integration story much easier for us. But that's not all of it. So the IntelliJ IDEA platform is also used as part of MPS. For those of you who are not familiar with MPS, it stands for Metaprogramming System, and it's essentially something that we call a DSL workbench. So this is a tool that lets you define your own domain-specific languages. It gives you for free essentially the IDE functionality for those domain-specific languages, and you can also specify how the DSLs get generated into something such as Java code or C code or JavaScript code or whatever you actually need as a target language. And this has a number of interesting uses. And MPS actually uses the UI framework of IntelliJ IDEA, but it does not use most of the code-centric features that make the IntelliJ IDEA platform so interesting, actually. So it does not use any text editors, it just replaces all of this with its own DSL-oriented editing framework. Another piece of code that uses the IntelliJ framework is actually the Kotlin compiler. So Kotlin, as you probably know, is a programming language that we are developing at JetBrains, and of course we wanted to reuse the same code base for the compiler itself and for the IntelliJ plugin. And in order to be able to do that, we actually extracted a small part of the IntelliJ IDEA IntelliJ platform, just the core PSI stuff, Java PSI, and overall parsing indexing logic, and packaged it as a separate jar and made use of it in the Kotlin compiler. And it's actually fairly small, so the distribution of the Kotlin compiler is just a little over 7 megabytes compared to, I don't know, 200 megabytes of the IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate. It's quite a big difference. And so the products based on the IntelliJ platform can also be quite lightweight. Another thing is something called Upsource, which I guess not that many people know about. We announced it recently, and right now it's more of a prototype than an actual product, but it's actually a very interesting one. So I'm going to show a little bit of this right now. So essentially, Upsource is a web-based source code browser, and right now it's you can go to upsource.JetBrains.com. It's public. It's not something that you can use for your own project, but you can use it for browsing the source of IntelliJ IDEA Community Edition source code. And you can see that it gives you. Okay, for some reason it does not give anything useful. So actually, it's supposed to be like real code editor with syntax highlighting and go to declaration, stuff like that. But looks like something is broken with Upsource. Okay, never mind. It's supposed to be very nice, but today it doesn't work. At least it shows you the diffs and other nice stuff. By the way, we do have something. Okay, so now probably did not completely index a new revision. So in the old revision, you actually see how the older navigation features work. So you can just press go to declaration. You can view the documentation. You can jump to implementations of stuff. So for example, look at all the PSI element implementations in the source code. It will take a while to load all of them, but yeah, you see that it shows some of the results. And actually, under the hood, this is also running running a slimmed down version of the IntelliJ platform. So we have obviously does not have any of the Swing UI that is part of the IntelliJ platform, but it uses the same part of the same core PSI framework that the Kotlin compiler also uses, and it adds extra chunks such as indexing and project model and interoperability and stuff like that. And right now it supports Java, but we are also planning to add other languages such as XML and JavaScript in the very near future. So that's essentially how we use IntelliJ framework internally. Beyond internal users, there are also a number of external products that already exist that are built on the IntelliJ platform. The list is not as long as we want it to be, and that's actually why we are holding this webinar, to tell more people about how the IntelliJ IDEA platform can be used and how you can build your own tools on top of that. So the big one is obviously Android Studio, which was announced by Google at the Google I/O conference a couple of months ago. It's not really a very good example of the platform usage because it's an IDE which is primarily it's a repackaged version of IntelliJ IDEA Community Edition. So there is not that much new development made by Google that makes it different from IntelliJ IDEA Community Edition itself. So there is a certain amount of new development that they did. They have a custom UI for the Gradle-based project model, and they customize some stuff to work the way they want it, and obviously they have their own branding. But all in all, it's not like a full-blown separate product. It's just very, very near to what we did with IntelliJ IDEA Community Edition. And by the way, it was developed completely in partnership with us, so we have given a lot of help to the Google guys, and we are very excited about how this all turned out and so on. Another user of our products is a company called Guidewire. And you probably have not heard of it because it's not a developer company at all. It's a company for building software for insurance companies essentially for calculating how much of an insurance bonus the how expensive your insurance policy is going to be. And they have their own programming language, JVM programming language called Gosu, and they are using it essentially to give the users of their products tools to program all this environment. And they have built an IDE for Gosu programming language on top of IntelliJ IDEA, and they have built also a lot of custom UI for the domain-specific stuff that they are doing. And it's not yet released, but it's going to be released fairly soon. And we've also have been in touch with them, and they seem to be quite happy with the experience that they've had working with the IntelliJ platform. The next project I would like to mention is something called Embedder. It's a fairly new thing. It's an open source tool which is based on MPS, and it targets MPS for the development of embedded software, as you can probably guess from the name. So when you want to write software for, I don't know, your fridge or something like that, you can, which has a microcontroller embedded in it. You can actually use embedded to write it in a nice graphical, high-level way, and then generate low-level C code that will get compiled by the platform compiler and that will actually run on the embedded device. So you can check out the blog here if you're interested in more details. And I don't know how much I can tell about some stuff about potential use of this tool, but we see this as a very exciting direction. A couple of more projects that I'm going to show now are no longer in active development, but still there are also to some degree success stories of using the IntelliJ platform. So the first one was by a Swedish company called ESN.me. And this company has built a web framework for real-time web development in Python. So their target market was mostly game developers, and they are actually used in the Battlefield series of games. And they have built actually a very nice framework and very nice tools for this framework built on top of PyCharm. So originally it was a plugin, and then they packaged it as a separate IDE and distributed it to their customers. Unfortunately, they were acquired by Electronic Arts, and so they are no longer providing support for this as a separate company. And so I guess the tool is no longer publicly available. Another project is something called Relaxy. This was an IDE for ActionScript, which was also based on MPS. So they have built the generators from them. So they built the DSLs that mirror the structure of ActionScript, and they built generators to the actual ActionScript language, and they had a fairly nice user experience. It was a commercial tool, but it wasn't so. I believe it never actually reached the 1.0 release. The development ceased in the year 2010, and now the website contains something completely different, not related to ActionScript in any way. So, having talked about how people are actually using the IntelliJ IDEA platform, now let's look at some of the components that are inside it. So I'll give a brief overview of the main modules that comprise the IntelliJ platform. You can actually look at the source code for it. So under the community directory, there is platform, and here are some of the modules that I'm going to be talking about: core, platform, and stuff like that. So it's all, you can just look at the source code and see how it all fits together. So the first module I'd like to mention is the core module. It's actually the most lower level part of the platform. It contains the virtual file system implementation, contains the general language support features such as lexing, parsing, PSI structure references, and so on and so forth. It contains some utility classes for working with multi-threading, collections. We have essentially our own poorly written version of Guava, and so on and so forth. It does not have any UI dependencies. It does not have any support for specific languages, but it's just the most basic building block on top of which you can build a compiler or an IDE or a command line analysis tool or something like that. And that's actually the part which is used by the Kotlin compiler. The next module is something called platform. The platform contains actually most of the UI stuff that we have. So it contains the action system, which lets you hook together toolbars and menu items and buttons and stuff like that. It contains most of our UI framework, tool windows, dialogues, fancy lists, tables, tree views, all of that stuff, pop-ups, and we have a lot of custom UI stuff in based on Spain. It also has our text editor implementation, and it has also the UI for the diff view. The next module is something called lang, and this contains the foundation for contains the basic implementations for our code inside features. And the way we do stuff is actually in this area is actually quite different from some of the other IDEs. So when we build some refactorings or code navigation features, we try to make them as general as possible. So we extract the language independent part and we put it into the lang module so that everyone can use it. And then we build specific implementations in specific languages where, for example, the Java or the Python module contains only the part that is specific for implementing this feature for this language. And what this means is that by writing a small amount of code, you can leverage a huge amount of code that we have built in the platform. You can get a lot of very powerful code editing features for very little effort. So yeah, some of the features that are there, like highlighting, navigation, completion, refactoring, code formatter. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. And if you are able to leverage this stuff for your project, then it's actually the way to get the biggest benefit out of the IntelliJ platform. So there's a bunch of other stuff there. The local history module is part of the platform, so we automatically keep track of all the changes that happen to files, and we let you revert them. And this feature saves a lot of users' time and saves them a lot of pain very often. We have a general framework for building debuggers, which is obviously used by our Ruby, by all of the IDEs that we have. We have a test runner framework, which is based on top of TeamCity service messages, and it's very easy to write an adapter for a custom test framework to plug it into the test runner and to get your green-red bar and test navigation, stuff like that for any test framework that you have in your custom language. We also have a general version control system integration framework. So if you need any kind of version control integration, you can take our VCS framework and you can take our plugins for supporting specific version control systems. And your users are going to get a great experience with version control without you doing anything about it. Now I'm going to talk about some of the modules that are not strictly speaking part of the IntelliJ IDEA platform. They belong more properly to the IntelliJ IDEA Community Edition source project, but they are still very useful pieces of functionality that you can use in your project if you need them. So the first one is Java PSI. And Java PSI is essentially, as it says here, it's a URLs part of our Java support. So it does parsing for Java, it does reference resolution, it does code analysis. Essentially, it does not do code completion because code completion is not something that you need in a standalone tool. It's an interactive feature. But if you are building, if you want to build, for example, a standalone code analysis tool, something similar to find bugs or check style, you can take the core part and the Java PSI part and to get a very lightweight subset of the IntelliJ IDEA community of edition source code and essentially use it for building your own tool and get a lot of stuff done by us for free. And the Kotlin compiler uses that as well, by the way, so it can parse Java class files and Java source files using the Java PSI modules so that you can get very smooth cross-language interop between Kotlin code and Java code. Then we have a lot of support for XML. It goes into all of our products, not just IntelliJ Community Edition. And we do a lot of stuff there. So obviously we do parsing, we do a lot of schema support, schema validation, and completion based on schemas, where schemas can be DTD or XML schema or relaxng. Also very common task is when different frameworks have XML-based configuration files. I don't know, the Spring Beans, for example, the Android manifest files or layout files. And those files contain, they have their own structure, and they have references to Java code and so on and so forth. And we have something called the DOM framework, which makes it very easy to build high-level features on top of that. So you can build navigation features and validation features very easily, and make sure that you can very easily achieve a real level of understanding of the XML structure by the IDE. And recently, as part of the Upsource integration, we have also separated this into UI and non-UI parts. So if you're building a command line tool that needs to do something with XML, you can do that without pulling in any extra dependencies. There are some other chunks that you may find useful, spell checker, images, regular expressions, stuff like that. So the underlying theme of all of that is that the platform is fairly modular, and you can choose the right set of modules for your specific tasks. You can choose which piece of functionality you want to support in your product, and you can pull the pieces, you can take the pieces that you need, and you can leave out all of the rest, and it's all nice and modular. Yeah, and beyond the modules that we have in the Community Edition, we also have a bunch of plugins that can be useful for you. So I have already mentioned version control integration. We have build system integration. We have test runner integration. We have issue tracker integration. This may or may not be appropriate for your product, but once again, you may choose to take whatever you need and leave the rest out. We have also a fairly new thing that we have as a framework for building UI designers. Right now, it's used by the Android UI designer and by the designer that we are by the UI designer that we are building for AppCode. And if you want to support a form designer in your own product, you can also build on top of this framework and get some stuff for free. Having said that, I have to mention that building a UI designer is still a fair amount of work, and you don't get all of it for free from the platform. There is still quite a lot of stuff that you need to do yourself. Now let's look at how the IntelliJ IDEA platform compares to some other, for example, the Eclipse or NetBeans RCPs. So the main thing that needs to be made clear is that we are not building a general purpose rich client platform. We never had this goal, and we don't have any plans to do this in the future. And you can probably try to treat our code base as like a general purpose UI platform, but it's not going to be a very good one. So if you just need some components to build a UI for your application, you will be better off using NetBeans if you like Swing, or Eclipse if you like SWT. But on the other hand, if you need to build a code-centric tool, if you need to build a tool that does something with source code, then IntelliJ IDEA, then IntelliJ Platform is a great choice, because it gives you a lot of stuff for free, and it gives you a lot of stuff that is going to be very important for you, and stuff that it would take you quite a lot of time to develop yourself. And it's also the IntelliJ IDEA platform is also not very perfect for graphics-intensive applications. So, for example, Eclipse has put a lot of effort, has invested a lot of effort into building general infrastructure for diagramming tools, like modeling tools and stuff like that. And we have some of that in IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate, but our framework relies on a non-open source graph library. And because of that, we are not currently able to make this available as part of IntelliJ IDEA Community Edition or IntelliJ Platform. It's possible that this will change in the future, but for now, it remains available essentially only to us, and not to those people who want to build products on top of our platform. So what kind of products could there be? So first of all, obviously, yeah, we are building IDEs, and you could build IDEs as well. And I have just listed a few languages for which we don't have any immediate plans to build our own IDE, and for some of them, it would be very nice to have good tools out there. So there are some probably things that look weird to you, such as, I know, Verilog VHDL is like not something that springs to mind when you are thinking about languages to build a new IDE for. But still, it's programming essentially, and as far as I know, the tools that they have right now are not very state-of-the-art compared to what IntelliJ can do, and maybe that's a great business opportunity out there. A more obvious option is to build framework-specific IDEs. So it's kind of similar to what the Spring source does with the Spring Tools suite, as one example. So there are a number of such IDEs based on Eclipse at the moment, but there are a lot of advantages to be had by building such stuff on top of IntelliJ, because we have very good very good underlying code editing framework, and all the stuff about DOM that I was mentioning before. It really lets you build a great product without investing a whole lot of time and effort into that. Another thing to build is code analysis or code exploration tools, just as one example. So we would love if something like Coverity or Fortify, for example, was integrated with our platform. And there's a lot of other stuff that you can build in this area. Maybe there is a possibility to build something for game development. So there is a lot of custom programming stuff, not just C++, but also stuff like Unreal Script or Lua, which I have already mentioned, or Unity Script. And maybe there is a big opportunity there, building a powerful code-centric tool for developing the code side of video games. Maybe there is also a business opportunity in the ERP area, so there's stuff like SAP and ABAP maybe, or something like that, or the Rush for those. If you are familiar with some Russian software, there is something called 1S accounting, which also has its own programming language, which does not have very good tools, and maybe someone could build tools based on our platform for that. That's of course not all. That's just some ideas that came to my mind when I was preparing this webinar, but obviously there's probably a lot of other stuff that you can come up with yourself. And yes, all of those are mostly developer tools. Maybe there is a possibility to build some tools which are not targeted on for developers based on the IntelliJ IDEA platform. Something, I don't know, powerful text manipulation tools, for example, I don't know, for screenwriting or stuff like that, or interactive fiction or stuff like that. But it's not really my task to come up with all the possible opportunities right here. Now comes the question of whether you want to build just a plugin or if you want to build a full-blown product on top of that. So first of all, in any case, you have to start with a plugin, because essentially what the product, as I mentioned, what a product is a custom packaged plugin with the platform. And before you can do that, you can just build a plugin and release it and see how many people use it, see if it turns out well, and then if you decide that you like it, you decide to package it as a product. And once you have a product, you have the possibility to remove the stuff that you don't want, to change the stuff that you don't like, and essentially to customize the user experience in any way that you like. And also you get full control over branding. So you get to put your own product name, you get to put your logos all over the place. We ask you to specify that the product is powered by the IntelliJ platform. And actually the Apache license requires you to do this in a specific way. But other than that, you get a lot of control over how the product looks. In terms of licensing, there is no such big imperative to go one way or the other. So right now, there is no restriction on publishing commercial plugins to the plugin repository. So you can have plugins that ask for license keys, essentially, and we don't ask you for any percentage of revenue or anything like that. And the same thing you can do with a product. You can build a product that has a licensing scheme built in. And there are no restrictions to that. There was a question in the webinar about whether we are going to do something like an app store, and the answer to this, so that users can get a nice way to distribute commercial stuff easily. And the answer to that is right now we simply don't see enough of commercial development to make it worth investing into it. But in the future, maybe this will become meaningful. Let's see how it goes. So as for licensing, as I mentioned, the platform is based on the Apache 2 license, and this puts very few restrictions on licensing on derivative products. You can have them as open source, you can have them as commercial, any way you like. And if you want to use some components in your product that are only developed, that are only available as part of the IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate, so for example, the diagramming API that I already mentioned before, or I don't know, the Perforce stuff, for example, it's only available in Ultimate. You can talk to us, and it's very well possible that we can find a way to license this code to you so that you would be able to distribute it as part of your product. So we are open to discussion on this very much. Talk to us, and I'm sure we will be able to come to a satisfactory solution. Now, having given a high-level overview, let's get a little bit technical and actually look at the mechanics of building a product. So I will not give a complete walkthrough of this right now, because 1 hour would not be enough for that, and probably it will bore a lot of you very much. So I'll just essentially leave a series of milestones that you will need to go through, and so that when if you actually decide to build a product, you will know where to look and you will know what questions to ask to do this in a meaningful way. So the key part of every product is something called idea.platform prefix. And idea.platform.prefix is actually a system property that controls which files are loaded by IntelliJ IDEA by the IntelliJ platform as the descriptors of the product. So there are actually two main files that specify what the product you run actually is, and I'm going to talk a bit about them in the next slides. But the key thing is that the system property specifies which files are going to be loaded. And you set this value of this property in the default VM options for your product, so that it always loads the stuff that you need. So the first of these files is some so-called plugin file. So the name of this file is idea.platform.prefix and then plugin.xml. And it has exactly the same structure as a regular plugin XML file that you need to write when you build your own plugin. Obviously, some of the stuff there does not really make sense, such as since build, until build, and stuff like that. But the overall structure, the list of components, the list of actions, the list of extensions and extension points, it's exactly the same as for individual plugins. And obviously, you don't have to list all of the components that you want to include directly in this file. You can include the necessary chunks of functionality that you want to have access to. So our own files are built essentially as a tree of separate chunks that include each other, and you can select the ones that you need to have in your product. So this is probably the most basic version of the product plugin file. So you are just including the entirety of the IntelliJ IDEA plugin file. And starting with that is probably the easiest part to get something running that looks like a product built on top of the platform. And of course, you can look at the source code of IntelliJ and look at IDEA plugin.xml file to get a more realistic example of how this looks like. So you see that we are declaring most of the file contains of includes of other files. So includes something called Reach Platform plugin, debugger, intention power pack, intention gadgets, so on and so forth. And then you have the regular list of components and extension points and extensions and stuff like that. The second file is the application info file. And this file actually is the single entry point for all the branding information that you have in your product. So it specifies the product name, all the logos that you use, version number, build number, so on and so forth. And normally your build script patches this, takes this file from the version control and patches it to include the correct build number there. And this is like a very simplified example of the file. So I have stripped out most of the fields there, but you see the important ones. So for like the company name and the build number and the URLs for the about box image and the splash screen image. And you can also look at the file in the IntelliJ IDEA source code. So this is like much more complete stuff. So you see that actually you have to specify a lot of different colors here and the names and URLs and stuff like that. But the thing is that all of this depends on a specific product, and you can change all of the stuff. And if there is something that you cannot change, then it's a bug, and you can file it to us, and we will fix it. So once you have those two files, you have to actually build the product in some way. And the best way to do this right now is to take the build script that builds IntelliJ IDEA Community Edition and simply to fork it and to make your changes to turn this into the script for building your own product. The script lives in build/script/dis.gant in the source code of Community Edition. And the way it works is, first of all, it uses something called JPS, which is our homegrown build system. It's the same thing that we are right now using inside IntelliJ as our external build system. And what it lets you do essentially is it lets you build an IntelliJ IDEA product from the command line or from the IDE, either way. So we are simply the build script loads the product file for the Community Edition. It builds it, it gets a bunch of class files, and then it does something called layout, which actually takes the class files from the output directory and packages them into jar files according to the structure you specify. So it makes a lib directory and the plugins directory and puts each module in its correct place. And it's actually a very nice DSL that we have also built internally based on Gant. And in a layout, of course, you have the common part, which is used for all of the platforms. And there are also platform-specific parts for Windows, Linux, and Mac. For example, there is a small number of native code components, and those components are specific to each platform. And there is something called, for example, the BAT file makes sense on Windows, and we do not include it in Linux or Mac distributions. Here is a very simple example of a layout script, just cut out from our main build script. So you see that by nesting these dir macro functions, you can define the structure of directories, and then you specify the jar files and specify which modules go into each jar file. So it's very nice and very, very readable DSL, and we like it very much. And yeah, the complete file is also obviously quite a bit bigger. No, that's the ultimate one. That's the other one. but it still uses the same structure, very clean and very readable. So a couple of other things that I would like to mention. So first of all, the Windows launcher. So previously we used exe4j to build the Windows launcher, which is a commercial product. Now we have our own launcher that is open source, and we have something called launcher generator, which patches it to include correct branding and stuff like that. And there is a function to build it, which is part of our GAN scripts, and you also want to change this and have your own launcher if you are building a product on top of IntelliJ Platform. Then we actually have to build the distributions for Windows, Mac, and Linux. And right now we are not giving as much help for this as we would like to be giving. So, for example, the scripts for publishing the installer are not open source at the moment. We want to open source them, and this will happen probably in the coming months, but I cannot give any promise, unfortunately. For the Mac, the scripts for building DMG are built very much coupled to our own environment. So our build script actually SSHs into a Mac machine and runs a script there to build the DMG, which is actually the script itself is written in Perl, of all things, and it's not something that we are looking forward to open sourcing. So you'll need to use all your own solutions. For Linux, it's fortunately easy. It's just a .zip file, and it's very easy to build, and there is nothing magical about that at all. And finally, if you have everything working correctly and you have a product and actually you start distributing it, there is also a number of things that you have to think about on the server side. So you have to think about where the exception reports go, how to provide automatic updates and patches. For this part, where you can actually reuse a lot of our stuff. So the patch building infrastructure is part of the community edition source code, and the updates file is a very simple XML file that you just have to put somewhere on your server and tell the URL, specify the URL in the application info file. So it's very easy to support that. You probably want to figure out something about the plugin repository, either use ours as the Android Studio does, or somehow build your own, or something like that. You have to think about where the usage statistics go, whether you want to share them with us or if you want to have all of them to yourself or stuff like that. And once again, the application info file is where you can customize all of this stuff. So the idea is that every URL that the product accesses from it is customizable through the application info. So you can put all that stuff on your servers and not reference any of the JetBrains stuff at all. So finally, one last question that we promised to answer: how to contribute to the IntelliJ IDEA platform. It's actually very easy. You just go to you just sign the CLA, the contributor license agreement, send it to us by email, and then you just go to GitHub and send us a pull request. And if when you build your product, if you run into some limitation of the platform, some API which is missing and not available in the product, you can always add this and send us a pull request to include this API in the core platform, and we try to be good in reviewing the pull requests and including them into the product. And obviously, you need to provide some motivation why you want this and why this is the best approach that you can take. But all in all, yeah, just go through GitHub and that's it. So that was what I wanted to tell you today, and now we should have plenty of time for discussion. And so let's switch to the questions and answer part.
Okay, Dmitry. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we received a number of questions as part of the webinar registration. I guess we'll start with answering those, and then we can take questions from the audience if there are any.
Thank you, Dmitry, for your presentation. Right now, I'm looking through the list of questions we got from people who signed up the webinar. Some of them are answered in your slides, but we have some interesting ones. So, a question from Ruby fan. So, is it possible to use any other non-Java languages for development plugins or product for IntelliJ Platform?
Right now, you have to use a language that compiles to Java class files. So you can use Java or Kotlin or Scala or maybe Clojure or maybe something, or maybe Groovy. But with Ruby, it's going to be interesting. So it may be possible to use like compiled JRuby code to build a product, but it's not something that we are doing internally. And so it's essentially
Okay, thanks.
on your own.
Another question, you mentioned that, but maybe you could provide more details. Is it possible right now to deliver commercial products on top of IntelliJ Platform?
Absolutely, yes, it's possible, and there are no restrictions to doing that.
And if you do it on top of plugins API, are there any plans for making a kind of app store for plugins?
Yeah, as I mentioned, this really depends on the level of interest that we get. So for now, we don't have many commercial plugins, and if we do have them, we probably are going to build such an app store. But for now, it's not in our near-term plans.
Okay. Some users are also curious if there are any policy on protection of author rights of third-party products. So how does JetBrains plan to proceed with possibly commercial third-party plugins that implements features eligible for inclusion into core functionality of your products? So things like that.
So the answer to this is actually we hate doing duplicate work. So if there is a good plugin that does something that we want to include in our product, then first of all, we want to talk to the developer of the plugin and find out if there is any possibility to use their code. And actually, there are quite a few plugins that we are shipping as part of the IntelliJ IDEA distribution, which were originally built as open source plugins by third-party developers. And obviously, every time we ask for permission and every time we come to some terms that are agreeable to both parties and ship the code. If there is a commercial plugin, there is also an opportunity. We are also willing to either simply point out people to the existing solution and leave it as a separate product, or if we really want this to be bundled, then we will discuss the possibility of licensing the existing commercial product so that we could include this as part of our code base.
Thanks. And the next one is more technical. It's about Visual Designer. How rich the API for Visual Designer is in IntelliJ Platform, and can be used in only an Ultimate Edition or in IntelliJ Platform as well?
So the Visual Designer is part of the Community Edition source code. It's not part of Ultimate. As for richness, I guess you can just look at it and see what it does, and it provides you with the foundation for building a designer. But the designer itself, it's something that you have to build internally.
Okay. Another user asks if there are any accessibility features in the platform.
Other than what Swing provides by default, no. So we don't have any specific for accessibility.
Yeah. And another question is about any quality metric tools for plugin developers they can use.
Actually, the best tool that we can recommend here is the tool that we are using ourselves, which is YourKit, YourKit Java Profiler. It gives a very good overview of performance and memory of usage of a Java application, and you can use it to explore what operations are taking long in your plugin and how much memory it uses and so
on. Okay. And one more question on how to maybe the best way to deal with change in API. So some users mentioned that they encountered problems with after some major change in API. What's the best way to deal with that problem?
Well, actually, it's one part where building a product actually saves you a lot of pain, because you are depending on a specific version of the platform. You choose which version that is, and you choose when to upgrade to a newer one, and there is never like unexpected breakage. The reason, unfortunately, if you are building a plugin, unfortunately, you do have to deal with API changes, and we try to minimize them, but in order to be able to evolve the platform in the direction that we want to evolve it, we simply have to break the APIs in order to modularize it and break the dependencies that are inappropriate. And all of these broad breadth of usage with the Upsource and the Kotlin compiler, it would not be possible at all if we had to preserve API compatibility between versions.
And probably the last one from Dave. He asks about PyCharm plugin. So yeah, I'm reading. Yeah, actually, the question is what PyCharm does represent? Is it a single plugin product?
Yeah, so with the story with PyCharm is that, so yeah, actually you can build a plugin that runs both with IntelliJ and the Python plugin, and also with PyCharm. And obviously PyCharm is a commercial product, so if you want to build your own product on top of PyCharm, then you need to discuss the licensing with us, because so you would need essentially to become a reseller of PyCharm or something like that, which is possible, but it's not as easy as it is with open source stuff. But technically, yes, you can build a plugin that works for PyCharm and uses Python-specific APIs. So, any more questions?
Okay. That's all what we have so far.
Okay, then if no one has any more questions, then thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, technical or non-technical or business related, please feel free to contact me directly. So YOLE@jetbrains.com or just follow me on Twitter, and I will be happy to help you with any like technical or marketing or business issues, or I will put you in touch with the right people to help you within the company. So thanks everyone. We will have the recording up.
Sorry, just to add.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add a few comments. You can find more information on IntelliJ Platform on its homepage, jetbrains.org. You can also see the source code of IntelliJ Community Edition on GitHub. So all sources are available. And for plugin development, you can go to our Confluence page and find the documentation on all steps how to develop plugins. And if you encounter any question you can answer yourself, you can ask it on developer community forum. So, and our developers monitor these questions, and we'll be happy to help you with these questions. So yes, that's all. Thank you for your attending. Follow our Twitter account, and if you have any questions on partnership, please contact Dmitry or Brian with this email address, and we will take all notes from this session and we'll publish it within a week after today. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.